No one expected the hearing to stop like that. Not because of shouting, not because of chaos, but because of a question that should have had a simple answer. A member of Congress looked directly at the Attorney General of the United States and asked, if the president takes $10 billion from his own government, is that constitutional? And she didn't answer. Not once, not twice. Every time the question came back, the answer disappeared. Because this wasn't just any lawsuit. The president is suing the IRS for $10 billion. And if that money is ever paid, it wouldn't come from somewhere abstract. It would come from the federal government itself. The same government he runs, the same system his attorney general represents. And that's where the problem begins. Because the Constitution is clear about one thing. The president gets a salary and nothing else from the federal government. No extra payments, no side deals, no settlements negotiated with people who ultimately report to him. So when that question was asked in that room, it wasn't political. It was constitutional. And still, no answer. Before we go further, subscribe right now and turn on notifications. Because what happened next wasn't just about one question. It was about what it means when the person in charge of the law refuses to explain it. And just a few minutes later, that silence turned into the most uncomfortable moment of the entire hearing. By the time that question was asked, the room had already been tense for hours. Back and forth arguments, prepared statements, carefully worded answers. Pam Bondi had handled all of it. She had her talking points. She had her strategy. She knew exactly how to navigate the pressure until that moment. Because the man asking the question wasn't guessing. He was building a case, step by step. He started with the Constitution. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 7, the Domestic Emoluments Clause. Simple idea. The president gets paid a salary and cannot receive any other money from the federal government while in office. No loopholes, no exceptions written into the text. And then he connected it to reality. This president is suing the federal government, not for a small amount, not for damages in the millions, but for $10 billion. That's not just a lawsuit. That's nearly the size of an entire federal agency's annual budget. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. If the case is settled, who approves that? The Department of Justice. Who runs the Department of Justice? The Attorney General. Who appoints the Attorney General? The President. So now the question isn't theoretical anymore. It becomes this. Can a president work out a deal with his own administration to pay himself billions of dollars? He even quoted the president himself. I'm the one that makes the deal. I kind of have to work it out with myself. The room reacted because suddenly this wasn't legal theory. This was real. So he asked again, clear, direct, no room to escape. Would that violate the Constitution? And again, no answer. Instead, I'm not going to discuss pending litigation. That's not a denial. That's not an explanation. That's a wall. And in that moment, everyone in the room understood something. She wasn't refusing because the question was unclear. She was refusing because the answer was, and that's when the tone changed. Because what came next was no longer just about the Constitution. It became something much harder to ignore. And then, he took the conversation somewhere no one expected, away from lawsuits, away from legal theory, straight into something real, something human. He looked at her and said, okay, if the president might get $10 billion for embarrassment over leaked tax returns, then tell me this. What are Epstein survivors worth? The room went quiet because this wasn't abstract anymore. This wasn't about clauses and legal language. This was about people. People whose names were supposed to be protected, whose identities were supposed to stay hidden. And yet, their names, phone numbers, even addresses ended up in public documents, unredacted. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He just laid it out. There are survivors who chose never to come forward publicly, and Congress respected that. Laws were written to protect them, and still, their information was exposed. So he asked again, if the president can claim billions for embarrassment, how much should these people receive for something far worse? For having their lives put at risk? For being exposed to threats? And again, no answer. But this time, It wasn't silence. It was deflection. She changed the subject completely. Brought up a name no one was discussing. Accused him of being obsessed. Said he had Trump derangement syndrome. The shift was obvious, because when the question gets too precise, the easiest move is to change the conversation. But he didn't let it go. He tried to bring it back, tried to keep it focused. And she kept talking, over him, past him, around the question, until finally he stopped. And what he did next was something no one expected to see in that room. Not from a member of Congress, not directed at the Attorney General. He asked for his time back. And when he got it, he didn't ask another question. He gave a lesson about rules, about how this room works, and what happens when someone refuses to answer. And that moment changed everything. When he got his time back, he didn't rush. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He slowed everything down. And then he said something no one expected to hear in that room, especially not directed at the Attorney General of the United States. I'm going to teach you the rules again. The entire room shifted, because this wasn't politics anymore. This was control. He explained it step by step. We have 5 minutes. We ask a question. You answer it. That's it. But if you don't answer, if you go off on tangents, start bringing up unrelated things, start talking over the question, then we reclaim our time. And when we reclaim our time, you have to stop. You have no choice. Those words landed, because everyone in that room understood what just happened. The Attorney General, the highest law enforcement officer in the country, had just been told how to follow basic hearing rules, like a witness who refused to cooperate, and it didn't stop there. He made it personal but not emotional. I invite you to my district, he said. Come visit, but that's not what we're here to do. Meaning, this isn't about distractions. This is about answers. And the answer he wanted still hadn't been given. The Constitution question unanswered. The survivor question ignored. So we moved to one last issue. Something practical. Something actionable. Would you create a task force? A real one. Bringing together federal, state, and local law enforcement to investigate crimes against Epstein survivors? A direct solution, a clear path forward. And again, she didn't answer. She deflected, changed the subject, brought up something else entirely. At that point, it wasn't about misunderstanding anymore. It was a pattern, question, deflection, repeat. And that's when the frustration finally showed. Not through yelling, but through clarity. Because when someone refuses to answer the same question over and over again, at some point, that refusal becomes the answer. And what came next made that reality impossible to ignore. By the end of those 5 minutes, no one in that room was confused anymore. Not about the question, not about the law, not about what was being asked. The only thing missing was the answer. And sometimes that's the most important part. Because here's what actually happened. A sitting attorney general was asked, if the president receives $10 billion from his own government, does that violate the Constitution? She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She said, I'm not going to discuss pending litigation. Then she was asked, what about Epstein survivors? People whose names, addresses, and phone numbers were exposed, who are now facing threats? No answer. Then she was asked, will you create a task force to investigate crimes against them? No answer. And finally, she was told the rules. We ask a question. You answer it. If you don't, we take the time back. You have no choice. And still, no answer. Because at some point, it stops being about what someone says and starts being about what they refuse to say. Think about it. If the answer were simple, it would have been given. If it were clearly constitutional, she could have said it. If it were clearly not, she could have said that too. But instead, there was silence, deflection, and avoidance. And that leaves one final question. What does it mean when the person responsible for enforcing the law won't explain it? Because in that moment, the most powerful line wasn't spoken by the Attorney General. It was spoken by the man asking the question. You have to be quiet. You have no choice. And yet, the question is still out there. If the president takes $10 billion from his own government, is that constitutional? If you made it this far, subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because this story is still developing and the next hearing might finally force an answer. And tell me in the comments, do you think the silence was strategic, or was it the only answer she could give?